Sascha Schneider's Der Astralmensch is easy to look at and is difficult to look away from. What you see is every person's astral body. The early 1900s were having a full collective crisis about what the soul even was, after science had spent the previous century methodically dismantling every old answer, and into that existential vacuum walked Theosophy, which was essentially a Victorian-era spiritual megamix of Hinduism, Buddhism, Egyptian mysticism, and several downloads that Madame Blavatsky received. And so Theosophy said, relax, the soul is real. It's just made of star matter, and also you have 7 bodies stacked inside each other, like a cosmic nesting doll. The astral body is the second layer, in the emotional spiritual self that survives death and carries the full weight of who you actually are. Schneider was happy about it and he painted it. He painted the part of you that the world never quite sees. You don't need to buy a single word of the Theosophy to feel exactly what this painting is doing, because the core premise is something every person has lived, the inner life that's too big for the container, the self that the social world has zero capacity for, the warmth at your centre that keeps going regardless of how cold and dark the circumstances get. The painting is 120 years old, and it keeps finding people who look at it and go, oh, that's me. That's exactly what it feels like in here. Which is either a testament to Schneider's genius or proof that the darkness has always been the same darkness and the glow has always been the same glow. Every culture that has thought carefully about consciousness has arrived eventually at the uncomfortable observation that the person and the body are two different things. The body is legible, it is measurable, mappable, finite. It begins and ends at the skin. The person is less cooperative. The person has an interior life that exceeds the body's boundaries in every direction. Desires that exceed full expression, feelings that language keeps failing to describe, an experience of being alive that seems to require more space than the body provides. Every major spiritual tradition has tried to account for this gap. The soul in Christianity, the Atman in Hinduism, the Buddha nature in Buddhism, the pneuma in Neoplatonism, and in the late 19th century, in the syncretic philosophical environment that Theosophy was assembling from all of these traditions simultaneously, the astral body. Schneider painted the current framework, the language his culture was using for this oldest of observations. The concept changes by century and by culture. But the observation it is trying to accommodate has been the same since the first person noticed that the life they were living felt smaller than the life they were. So in Theosophy, you don't just have one body, you have several, nested inside each other, each one made of progressively finer matter, each one vibrating at a higher frequency, each one carrying a different dimension of what you are. The physical body is just the outermost one, the heavy, slow, dense layer that needs feeding and sleeping and complains about the cold. Inside that sits the etheric body, which is basically the life force double, the energetic blueprint the physical body is built from. And inside that, glowing with its own light like a lamp inside a lamp inside a lamp, sits the astral body, the body of feeling, of desire, of the entire emotional apparatus that makes you a person rather than an organism. The astral body is where your feelings actually happen. When something devastates you, or delights you, or makes you fall in love, or fills you with inexplicable dread. That's not your physical body doing that. Your liver is not processing the grief. Your kneecap is not responsible for the terror. That's the astral body, the second layer self, receiving the world at the frequency that matter can't quite access. Blavatsky and her colleagues built an entire cosmology around this body and its adventures. How it travels during dreams, how it lingers after physical death, carrying the emotional residue of the life just lived, how it evolves across multiple incarnations towards states of purity that the denser bodies make impossible to maintain. The astral plane, the dimension the astral body inhabits, interpenetrates the physical world the way heat interpenetrates a room. It's there. Most people just can't see it. People who could see it, according to Theosophy, were clairvoyants, and what they saw around ordinary people was the aura, the visible radiation of the astral body, colour-coded by emotional and moral state the way a mood ring aspired to be, but never quite managed. Murky red-brown for anger and selfishness, clear blue for calm intelligence, deep violet for spiritual development, and for the rarest, most evolved cases, for the person whose astral body had been refined through lifetimes of practice into something genuinely luminous, warm gold. The gold of the sun at the hour before it sets, the gold of something that has been burning long enough to burn clean. What makes Schneider's version of this idea remarkable is the visual argument he builds around it. The astral man is surrounded by darkness. This is the painting's first and most essential formal decision. And it is a decision about epistemology, about what conditions make certain kinds of knowledge visible. The aura disappears against a bright background. The aura is perceptible only in the dark, only in the space where the surrounding world has zero to offer, where the external sources of illumination have withdrawn, and what remains is what the figure generates from within. The darkness is the painting's enabling condition. It is what the glow needs in order to be seen. Interiority is most visible when the external world goes quiet, when the noise and light of ordinary life recede, when the social performance is suspended, when the demands and distractions of the surrounding world reduce themselves to zero. In those conditions, the inner life becomes legible. You can see what was always there. The darkness is a gift over a punishment. The void between stars is where the stars are most themselves. Psychology arrived at the same observation from a completely different direction. Carl Jung spent decades studying the relationship between the conscious mind and what he called the unconscious, the vast interior territory that most people experience as noise, as mood, as inexplicable attraction, and inexplicable dread, as the dreams that leave a residue on the waking day. His central argument was that the conscious self is a small lit room in a very large dark house, and that most of what makes a person who they are is outside the lit room. In the dark, in the territory the small room has zero access to. The work of psychological development, in Jung's framework, required expanding the relationship to the dark over acquiring more light for the small room, but the expansion of the person's relationship to the dark, the willingness to go into the house's unlit rooms and acknowledge what lives there. The astral man in Schneider's painting is at ease in the dark. He is standing in it. He is generating his own light inside it. He is doing visually what Jung spent his career trying to describe verbally. Schneider's astral man is at rest. His transcendence is continuous with his physical existence, but an expression of it. The body and the spirit in the painting are doing the same thing, oriented in the same direction, producing the same light together. This is the theosophical vision at its most optimistic. The physical body is the ally of the spiritual. Beyond the cage the soul is trapped in, the vehicle over the obstacle to be overcome. What the painting is proposing about human identity met the full resistance of the materialist worldview of Schneider's era was actively trying to suppress. The dominant intellectual current of the 19th century, evolutionary biology, industrial capitalism, the rise of psychology as a scientific discipline, the general victory of empiricism over metaphysics, was converging on a picture of the human being as a body, and only a body, an organism of deterministic biological drives and chemical processes with zero remainder, zero surplus, zero part that exceeded the physical. This was the century that had killed God, or thought it had, and was now staring at the vacancy. The astral body, the concept and the painting, was one of the era's responses to the vacancy. The assertion, made with the language of the cosmos over the language of theology, that there was in fact a remainder, a surplus, a part of the human being that the materialist account failed to capture, and that was, moreover, the most real part, the part that generated the light. The painting works as a mirror for this experience because Schneider knew the experience from the inside. He was a gay man in a country that criminalized his desire. He was an esoteric idealist in a culture accelerating toward materialism. He was a painter whose visual ambitions exceeded the commission structure available to him. He contained, and this is what the painting is ultimately about, more than his circumstances allowed him to express. And the excess was real, and the excess glowed, and the darkness of his circumstances was the very condition that made the glow visible. He was the astral man. He painted himself free of painting himself. He made the universal from the personal, by stripping the personal down to its essential structure, and finding that the essential structure was a thing everyone recognized. Schneider painted this with the specificity of someone for whom the gap between the inner and outer versions of himself was a daily lived condition over an abstract philosophical problem, but a daily lived condition. The painting knows what it is describing because the painter knew what he was describing. The figure's gaze, and directed outward and slightly past the viewer toward a point that the physical space of the canvas fails to contain, is the painting's most subtle psychological claim. He is looking at what the viewer has zero access to, which is the defining attribute of the person whose inner life opens onto territory the outer world has zero access to. The theosophical doctrine that gave Schneider his vocabulary was a symptom of a much larger cultural hunger, the hunger of a civilization that had dismantled the frameworks that used to answer its deepest questions and was now standing in the rubble with the questions intact. What am I? What survives? What is the relationship between this body and this consciousness, this individual life and the large life it participates in? The doctrines that theosophy assembled, the astral planes, the subtle bodies, the evolutionary ladder of spiritual development, were a real attempt at these questions, and the attempt was sincere even when it was confused. What the questions were pointing at, underneath the doctrine, was the irreducibility of the inner life. This is the painting's deepest claim about what a human being is, a warm spot in a cold universe. Beyond mistake, anomaly, accident, a warm spot. A place where the cosmic forces have organized themselves into the particular miracle of a consciousness, a subjectivity, an inside. The warmth of the aura's core tones is the painting's way of painting interiority itself. The literal warmth of a living body, yes, but also the warmth of caring, of feeling, of the whole apparatus of experience that the cosmos has managed to produce in this one arrangement of matter, in this one dark field. The glow is the warmth of being a subject in a universe of objects. It is the light that subjectivity generates simply by existing. Every person who has ever felt acutely alive, acutely present, acutely feeling, in those rare moments when the usual distance between the self and its experience collapses and the world arrives with full force, has been in the territory the painting is depicting, the territory of full contact with one's own interiority. The moments are brief because the organism has zero capacity to sustain that level of permeability to its own experience indefinitely. The ordinary state involves considerable buffering, the protective distance between the event and the feeling, between the person and what the person is going through, the thickness of habits and routine, and the low-level numbness that makes daily life survivable. The astral man has zero buffers. His interiority is his surface. What he is on the inside is what he is showing, and what he is showing is light, and the light is the unmediated experience of being alive. The philosophical tradition has a word for this state, though the word is usually applied to moments of meditation or contemplative practice, and the word is presence. Being present means being fully in contact with your own experience as it is occurring, free of the retrospective editing and the anticipatory anxiety that occupy most of the ordinary mind's bandwidth. Presence is the condition in which the inner life is legible to itself, in which the glow is visible, because the noise has gone quiet, in which the warmth of the centre reaches the surface, because there is zero between the centre and the surface to stop it. The astral man is a portrait of presence. He is also, by implication, a portrait of what most people are the rest of the time, carrying their inner light in a housing that the surrounding world has trained them to make opaque. The question of whether this is aspiration or description, whether the painting's depicting a state to be achieved or a state that already exists but is invisible to ordinary perception, is one the painting holds open over resolving. The theosophical reading is descriptive. This is what the human being actually looks like to someone who can perceive the astral level. This is a factual account of what surrounds the physical body at all times. This glow is already there regardless of visibility. The psychological reading tilts aspirational. This is what a person might look like if they had done the work of fully inhabiting their own interior, if they had developed the discipline of presence that the contemplative traditions describe, if they had stopped managing their intensity down to the level the world requests. The painting allows both readings to coexist and to fertilize each other, because the aspiration becomes more motivating when you understand it as the description of a state that already exists in you, and the description becomes more urgent when you understand it as a capacity to be cultivated over merely observed. The body's relationship to the aura, which is to say, the relationship between the physical and the spiritual, between the visible and the invisible, between the container and what it contains, is the painting's central subject. And it is rendered with a visual intelligence that goes well past the doctrinal content that inspired it. The aura originates from inside the body, free of any external source, and fall upon it, the way divine light falls on saints in Christian iconography, investing the figure with a sanctity bestowed from an external source. The aura originates from the body, from within the body, from the interior of the form. The body is the source. The light is what the body generates when it is fully itself. This is the romantic inheritance that the painting is carrying into the 20th century. The romantic insistence that the sacred is immanent, internal, generated from within the human form, over-bestowed from above by an external authority. The Romantics had found God inside consciousness, above it. The Theosophists found the cosmos inside the body, over surrounding it. Schneider found the light inside the dark, and he painted it with the confidence of someone who understood that this was a claim about the nature of reality over a metaphor for an internal state. Or more precisely, the claim about the nature of reality and the claim about the internal state were the same claim, and that the painting was the place where the two converged, where the metaphysical and the psychological were for once describing each other's territory, free of error. This is what Schneider painted in 1903, in the particular darkness of his particular life, in the available language of his particular time. The doctrine is period-bound. The language is dated. The painting is immediate. It is immediate because the experience it depicts, the experience of being alive from the inside, of containing more than the container allows, of glowing in a darkness that the surrounding world has arranged and that has zero access to the centre, is an experience that has zero expiry date. The painting finds you where you are. It finds you in whatever darkness you currently occupy, and it shows you, in warm amber paint against a deep ground, what you look like from the inside. The body as the origin of light over its recipient is the painting's most decisive departure from the entire prior history of sacred imagery in Western art, and the departure is so complete that it can be easy to miss because the painting borrows so much of the visual vocabulary of the tradition it is revising. The golden light, the darkness, the upright figure against a cosmic ground. These are the elements of a devotional image, and the eye processes them as such before the mind has identified what is different. What is different is the direction. In the iconographic tradition that runs from Byzantine mosaics through Renaissance altarpieces, through the Catholic and Protestant devotional imagery of the centuries immediately preceding Schneider, light comes from above. It falls on the figure. It illuminates the figure from outside, entering the scene from a divine source above the frame, catching the upturned faces of the saints and the martyrs and the worshippers, and investing them with a sanctity they receive over-generate. The light is God's. The figures are lit. Schneider's figure is the source. The light comes from inside him and moves outward. The direction is reversed, and the reversal is a complete theological statement made free of words. The sacred is beyond above, falling on you from a height you lies beyond reach. The sacred is inside you, generated by you, moving outward from the centre of what you are. The divine source has relocated. It has moved from the sky into the body, from the external authority into the interior life, from the bestowed to the inherent. This is the great migration that the 19th century made from the theological to the psychological, the movement of the sacred from the transcendent to the immanent, from above to within. And Schneider painted it as a formal inversion in a single image. The consequence of this inversion is considerable. If the light comes from outside, then the self is passive in relation to the sacred. A recipient, a vessel, filled by a force larger than itself, and illuminated by a source it depends on. This is the theological model of the soul. Dependent, derivative, contingent on the grace of an external authority for its luminosity. If the light comes from inside, then the self is active, a generator, a source, the origin of the illumination it projects into the surrounding darkness. This is the model that the Romantic tradition had been building toward for a century before Schneider painted it so clearly. The self as sovereign, self-illuminating, carrying its own authority, answerable to zero external source for the light it generates. The political implications of this shift are rarely discussed in relation to Schneider's painting, but they are present in the image, with the insistence of things that have been painted into the structure over being added to the surface. A self that is illuminated from outside is a self that depends on the right authorities approving of it in order to glow. Remove the approval, remove the institutional sanction, and the light goes out. The self in this model is only as luminous as its relationship to the external source. A self that generates its own light depends on zero external authority. It glows regardless of institutional approval. It glows when the church condemns it, when the state criminalizes it, when the culture refuses to see it, when the darkness of social disapproval closes in from every direction. The darkness in this model is a condition of the glow. The darkness is the condition that makes the glow visible. This reading is enough. The astral body, as the self that exceeds social legislation, was available in 1903 to anyone willing to hold the painting's formal logic and the social reality of Schneider's situation in the same thought simultaneously. The state had decided that certain inner lives were criminal. The painting was asserting that the inner life is prior to and larger than any state's authority to define it. The theosophical answer is straightforward. The astral body is always there. The glow is always there. The experience of it in meditation, or contemplation, or the presence of the right image, is an experience of a state that was present before the experience and will persist after it. The encounter with the painting is a reminder, in this view, over a vision, a moment of re-recognition of what is always already the case, a clearing away of the everyday opacity to reveal the warmth that was generating the whole time behind the usual presentation. The painting hands you the glow. The painting shows you the glow you already have. The secular version of the same claim is made by the contemplative traditions, by the Stoic practice of attending to the present, by the Buddhist instruction to return to the breath, by the psychotherapeutic emphasis on contact with the actual, felt experience of the moment over the narrative the mind constructs around it. All of these practices are, in their different idioms, pointing at the same territory, the experience of being present in one's own life, of having the interior reality in contact with the surface, of generating from within the sense of being fully alive that most people pursue outside themselves and find intermittently and temporarily in the things that the world offers. The astral man is the image of this territory. He is the image of what the practices are pointing toward. He is what a person looks like when they have arrived at the territory, or more precisely when the territory has arrived at them, which is what the ease of his posture is saying. The territory is home, and home is always there, and the journey to it is the journey inward that the painting is both depicting and facilitating.